I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C. Here are the top stories that made headlines this week in the United States.
You might get deported from this country. So it is incredibly scary for people.
Protests at Harvard University after the Trump administration demands detailed records on foreign students. Enrollment of international students could be banned if it does not comply. Meanwhile, the White House has frozen $2 billion in federal funds for the university and threatened to revoke its tax-free status. Harvard has refused to give in to Trump's demands on changes at the university. A federal judge has stopped the deportation of an Indian student, saying officials lack legal grounds for the move. Krish Isaldasani, who studies in medicine, was arrested in an altercation last year but never charged. Meanwhile, another Indian student, Chinmay Diore, is part of a group suing the US government for allegedly terminating his status without notice or explanation. Immigration and Customs Enforcement say they acted appropriately in detaining a man from Guatemala. The man's family says ICE began smashing windows of their car despite telling agents they were waiting on their lawyer to arrive. ICE says the man is an illegal alien. His attorney says the man had applied for asylum. The incident happened in Bedford, Massachusetts.
The pressure campaign on Iran continues, but as you know, the president has made it clear he wants to see dialogue and discussion with Iran.
A second round of talks between the US and Iran taking place this weekend in Rome as Trump puts pressure on Iran to dismantle its nuclear program. Meanwhile, threats of negotiations breaking down elsewhere. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying he's threatened to walk away from the Russia-Ukraine peace talks if no progress is made.
I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
President Trump lashing out at Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, saying he could be terminated. Trump's remarks coming after Powell said tariffs could inflict lasting economic damage. Trump wants Powell to cut interest rates, but Powell says the Fed is politically independent. The world is once again watching Iran and the United States as nuclear talks are set to resume over the weekend, this time in Rome. After days of back and forth over the venue and a major shake-up in Iran's negotiating team, tensions do remain high. Here's why.
The world's most volatile standoff is back on the table. Iran and the United States will face off again, this time in Rome.
I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death. And I'd like to see that. That's my first option.
خیلی خوشبینیم نه خیلی بدبینیم. به طرف مقابل البته خیلی بدبینیم. طرف مقابل رو قبول نداریم. میشناسیم طرف مقابل. اما به توانایی خودمون.
After days of diplomatic whiplash, from naming Rome to pivoting to Oman, Iran has locked in Rome as the site of the next nuclear talks. Oman will once again mediate. And while the venue was still being debated, Iran's president accepted the resignation of Mohammad Javad Zarif, architect of the 2015 nuclear deal, now criticized by headliners for giving too much away. His likely replacement, Mohsen Ismaili, a legal scholar and moderate, now steps in as vice president for strategic affairs and could lead Iran's negotiation team. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi has arrived in Tehran, aiming to restore inspector access and pull both sides back from the brink. Since the US pulled out in 2018, Iran has ramped up enrichment to 60%, dangerously close to weapons-grade 90%.
The deal that was made with Obama, that deal would have expired already. It was a terrible deal. It would have expired.
This round of talks doesn't happen in a vacuum. The Israeli-Gaza war rages on. U.S. airstrikes pound Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen. And now, a powerful new signal from the Gulf. In a rare move, Saudi Arabia's defense minister visited Tehran, the highest-ranking royal to step foot on Iranian soil since the 1979 revolution. He's met with the Iranian president and supreme leader Khamenei, who declared that it's better for regional brothers to cooperate than rely on outsiders. As Tehran hosts U.S. negotiators, a UN chief, and a Saudi defense minister, the moment is historic. But the outcomes are far from certain. The pieces are on the table, the enrichment continues, the threats are real, and the time to decide is running out. Will this be diplomacy's last stand or the beginning of something far more dangerous? With Ridha Makedia, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
A dramatic showdown between President Trump and one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, Harvard University. The White House has withheld funding worth $2.3 billion from the school. It has threatened to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status, and now it's demanding records of international students involved in what it calls illegal activities. If it doesn't comply, Harvard could face a ban on enrolling foreign students. Now, the face-off comes as Harvard refused to accept a list of demands from the Trump administration regarding leadership, hiring, dismantling its diversity policies in a bid to fight anti-Semitism.
I think Harvard's a disgrace. I think what they did was a disgrace. They're obviously anti-Semitic, and all of a sudden they're starting to behave. But when you see what they were saying, what they were doing, when you see the way they took care of events, when you watch that woman, that horrendous president that ruined the image of Harvard, maybe permanently, in Congress, in the halls of Congress, when you take a look at what happened there, it was horrific.
In other news now, a startling 1,000 foreign students in the US have had their visas cancelled since March. That's according to data compiled by the Associated Press, which examined various university documents and court records. Meanwhile, a huge reprieve for an Indian student in Madison. A federal judge has stopped Krish Isardasani from being deported, saying officials lacked legal grounds to have him removed. Isardasani was arrested in an altercation last year, but was never charged. In other developments, foreign students have begun suing the Trump administration for revoking their visas. One of them, Indian student Chinmay Dure from Detroit, who has filed a lawsuit. His lawyer says Dure has no criminal record or charges against him. And in yet another lawsuit, a graduate student from the Ohio State University has also taken legal action. His lawyer, Rafael Urena, now joins us to talk about that case. Rafael, thanks very much for joining us here on Washington Watch. Rafael, can you explain what exactly happened with your client, Awar Sultan, who is a teaching assistant at Ohio State University?
About 2 weeks ago, Mr. Sultan received an email from Ohio State University informing him that his Civis portal was deleted and that the Ohio State University had received an email from the government stating that his status and visa was revoked.
And why do you think that happened?
Well, this is a clear case of the United States government and President Trump weaponizing immigration enforcement to punish protected political expression. Mr. Sultan exercised a fundamental American constitutional right to protest and now faces the threat of deportation as a result.
So he took part in a pro-Gaza protest, is that correct? Was he charged? What were the charges?
He did. He was arrested. All of the charges were dismissed and expunged from his record.
All right. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has repeatedly said that foreign students are here to study. He says a visa is not a privilege and a right, not for foreign students like Sultan to take part in political movements. Isn't the US government allowed to decide whom it wants in the country and what these visitors should do while they're here?
Well, it's within reason. Students here in the United States of America have a First Amendment protection to engage in political speech. It's part of the reason why we invite students from all around the world to come to the United States so they can engage in these discussions and engage in protests. It's fundamental to the experience that they're having here in the United States at our universities.
Do you worry that today it's about Gaza, tomorrow it might be about something else?
No, that's the whole reason for the First Amendment. So we can I misunderstood the question. Well, it is very much a concern that the government will start weaponizing all of this speech they find to be contrary to what they believe in. And we're going to be a more repressed society as a result.
Rafael, now the Trump administration is implementing a 1952 immigration law. A person can be categorized as inadmissible if he or she will have adverse foreign policy consequences, so to speak. Is that what you think happened with Sultan?
I think it's unclear what the government has used to effectuate the visa revocation. It's very clear that they have not provided notice as they should have, and the courts are agreeing with many students across the country that they did not effectuate the proper notice to the students to tell them exactly what's going on and give them an opportunity to respond.
How worried should students like your client Sultan should really be if they've taken part in these pro-Gaza rallies previously?
I think they should be concerned. The Trump administration is taking a heavy hand against them. I think they should seek representation and fight back in the courts, where many of them are winning.
All right. Just want your quick reaction on this one. Now, the Associated Press, as you heard me say earlier, 1,000 international students at 160 U.S. colleges and universities have had their status revoked. Advocacy groups actually saying that that number could be 1,300. What are you hearing? Are you getting more calls? Are you seeing more clients on this front?
Yes, I'm receiving calls every day, every hour from scared students around the country. And I expect when the government starts to use AI and starts to really investigate people who are protesting that those numbers will only grow.
Right. Just very quickly here, we do have time for one more question here. One Indian foreign student from the University of Wisconsin-Madison has got a reprieve this week. A judge said that he cannot be deported. He has never been charged with anything. We might see more decisions like this, but are you worried that the Trump administration may find other ways to still deport these students?
I am worried about that. The government always evolves. The Trump administration always evolves their tactics to conform with barriers or perceived barriers in trying to effectuate their agenda. So I think more heavy-handedness is to come.
Rafael Urena, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Washington
Thanks for having me.
Watch. In other news now, Florida State University remains in shock after a shooting incident Thursday. The son of a police officer opened fire using his mother's former service weapon. 2 people are dead and at least 6 others are injured. The motive remains unclear.
A sun-drenched Florida day disrupted by sounds of gunshots. People ducking, running for their lives, as the U.S. was hit by another mass shooting incident. Leaving 2 people dead and 6 injured. As a gunman opened fire on Florida State University campus on Thursday.
Oh my gosh.
The alleged gunman has been identified as 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, a university student and son of a police officer. According to eyewitnesses, the incident took place around lunchtime when the shooter got out of his car and started firing indiscriminately, using her police officer mother's former service weapon.
I was looking at my phone while I was walking and I hear a crack. I immediately knew this to be a gunshot. And as soon as I heard that, obviously, look up, it got my attention.
The U.S. is no stranger to mass shooting incidents. To put it into perspective, there have already been 81 mass shooting incidents in the US. It peaked at 689 in 2021. Meanwhile, President Trump yet again defended gun rights.
I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment. I have been from the beginning. I protected it. And these things are terrible. But the gun doesn't do the shooting, the people do.
While these incidents rattle the collective consciousness of America each time, not much has been done to put an end to a problem that has plagued the nation for decades. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington will stop brokering a Ukraine peace truce within days unless there are clear signs that a deal can be done. The comments coming just hours after Ukraine signed the outline of a minerals deal with Washington, which could give the U.S. preferential access. The U.S. says the deal will mean setting up an investment fund for Ukraine's reconstruction. Let's take a closer look at the world of critical minerals that has been dominating the headlines. Critical minerals and metals are key to everything from our cell phones to hospital equipment to even weapons. I am now joined by critical minerals expert Gracelyn Bhaskaran at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a think tank in Washington. Gracelyn, thank you very much for joining us here on Washington Watch. Gracelyn, there are estimates that around 5% or so of the world's critical raw materials are in Ukraine. What kind of materials are these in Ukraine that we're talking about?
Thanks so much for having me here today. So there's two things we were looking at. One is what materials they have. We know there's lithium, vanadium, titanium. One of the big questions are about rare earths, however, and that was a lot of the foundation of this agreement. Now, it's important to note that there's a difference between just having a material and what is actually economically viable to extract. Rare earths actually exist in trace amounts all over the world. Now, the difficulty in Ukraine is that a lot of the mapping that we have of Ukraine is between 30 to 60 years old. It was done by the Soviet Union, and the former director of the Ukrainian Geological Survey has come out and said there is no modern mapping of rare earths. So while there are strategic materials in Ukraine, one of the big questions is, can we get the mapping done? And then how do we overcome other strategic barriers that may stand in our way, like the risk that looms from Russia, as well as limited power infrastructure?
So if those resources, Gracelyn, are limited in Ukraine, let's shift our attention to the world's mighty dragon of critical minerals and rare earths. That's China, of course. It's got this near monopoly. Now, in the ongoing trade war, Beijing has imposed import restrictions, as you know, on the subset of critical minerals, as we've been talking about, called rare earths. Why does this matter? If you could explain to us, how dependent really is the United States on China for this?
So what are rare earths? And that'll tell you why they're so important to us. So rare earths are actually a group of 17 minerals, and they are in a variety of very important industries. So they are virtually in every form of defense technology, from fighter jets and warships to missiles, lasers, tanks. They're in your MRI and PET scanners in the medical industry. They're in phones and semiconductors, and they're in many forms of energy technologies. The difficulty with rare earths is actually the concentration. So as I said earlier, rare earths are everywhere. However, what's difficult is taking them out of the ground and separating them. Now, these new restrictions from China only apply to one group of rare earths. So we have two kinds, broadly speaking. We have light rare earths and heavy, and they're literally identified by their atomic weight. These rare earth restrictions apply to heavy rare earths, and 99.5% of the world's rare earths go to China for separation. It's actually now higher than 99.5 now that Vietnam has Vietnam's one facility is currently offline, which means that when China imposes export restrictions, there's not another alternate supply of heavy rare earths we can tap into.
Yeah, so China critical to these critical minerals. Now, Gracelyn, Trump wants to boost U.S. production of critical minerals and cut our reliance here on imports, especially China. What do you think of that? How possible is it?
It's really important, and it's not about being pro-US or pro-China or pro-India, because there's many countries in the equation. It's actually about the notion that a diverse global supply chain is a really healthy one. Now, the difficulty we have is that geology is where geology is. And at the end of the day, when it comes to rare earths, the US does have a limited supply. We have about 1.3% of the world's rare earths. In comparison, India has about triple what we have. But where our critical choke point is those midstream processing facilities. And the US has spent about $430 million of federal money to build those facilities in Texas and California, but they're not ready yet. And the reality is that these facilities are technically complex, expensive, and take time to build. So until those facilities are completed, we are still highly vulnerable.
Gracelyn Pasquin, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Washington Watch. In other news now, US Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha, the Indian-American Second Lady, will pay a 4-day visit to India beginning April 21st. Vance will hold talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a likely focus on early finalization of a proposed bilateral trade pact. Vance is traveling to India amid the rising global concerns over President Donald Trump's tariffs. Both sides are likely to deliberate on firming up of a proposed trade deal that is aimed at addressing issues relating to levies, market access, and supply chains. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says that he has spoken with Tesla boss Elon Musk and discussed various issues, including the topics that the two had covered during the PM's visit to the United States earlier this year. The Indian Prime Minister highlighted the immense potential for collaboration between India and the United States in technology and innovation. Modi reaffirmed India's steadfast commitments to advancing partnerships in these areas. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is under fire after claiming autism is preventable, contradicting experts in his very own department. His remarks followed a CDC report showing 1 in 31 US children are now diagnosed with autism, a sharp rise since 2020. Kennedy blamed environmental toxins, not genetics, saying that genetics don't cause epidemics. He also accused the media of ignoring the issue and promised new investigations into possible causes, including mold, food additives, and parental obesity. And finally, before we wrap up, lock the clocks. Some lawmakers, and President Trump too, are hoping to maximize the sun. They are calling for ways for Americans to do away with fiddling around with their clocks twice a year. Time for our story on time. Every year, on every second Sunday of March, clocks in the US spring forward by 1 hour. It's called daylight saving time. That means going around your house, adjusting the time on your watch, your microwave clock, the one on your oven as well. Fortunately, phones do it for you.
I'm not in love with daylight saving.
I think it definitely does throw people for a loop.
Moving the clock forward means 1 less hour of sleep for man and beast alike. Shall we go? Let's go. Come on. Let's go.
It does mess with the sleep schedule.
Daylight savings, really challenging on the kids.
So less sleep and potential for being late, to work the next day.
So you'd rather have it stay the same so that you can sleep in?
Yeah.
With the clocks moving forward, it means more light in the evening, but the exact opposite happens when daylight saving ends. In November, the clocks are set back an hour, with the evenings getting darker sooner.
I do like the longer evenings in the summer. I guess the trade-off would be in the winter.
President Trump is urging Congress to make daylight saving time permanent, meaning more light in the evening and no changing the clocks twice a year.
No, I don't think that's a good idea at all. I think that people should decide instead of just having it, do this, do that. There should be a referendum on daylight savings time. I don't know.
Don't make it permanent, because otherwise in the winter and you end up with people going to school in the dark and going to work in the dark.
I'm not terribly supportive of much that the administration does, but I think this may be a good idea.
For me, I would like to get rid of it. I feel like it shouldn't be an idea. Like, there's just other things to kind of think about. This shouldn't be a priority.
This is Ladybug.
What do you think Ladybug would want? Daylight savings to stay or go?
Go, so
All right.
keep her dinner time.
So she can keep a dinner time?
Yeah.
So if Trump gets his way, it will certainly mean longer evenings out your window. For NDTV, Allister D'Souza, Washington, D.C. That's it from Washington Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza.